The stench of sweat permeated the cramped bunk. I ran a grimy hand over my stubble, feeling the exhaustion etch itself deeper into my features. Another cycle, another back-breaking shift in the heart of this forsaken asteroid. I stared at the chipped ceiling, its dull grey mirroring the gloom within me. A cough rattled in my chest, a souvenir from the last cave-in. They called it X-49, this desolate rock adrift in the cosmic void. A breeding ground for nightmares, I'd say. They sent us here, desperate men with tarnished pasts and dwindling prospects, lured by promises of riches buried beneath the surface. Fools we were, drawn to the glimmer of rare minerals like moths to a flame. But the only wealth we found was hopelessness and a slow descent into madness. I swung my legs over the bunk, the metal creaking a protest. My boots hit the cold floor with a thud, the sound swallowed by the silence of the dormitory. The rest of the crew was still out cold, the rhythmic snores a morbid lullaby. A grimace twisted my lips. They were lucky bastards, lost in the oblivion of sleep. I dragged myself towards the cracked mirror, the reflection a parody of a man. Sunken eyes stared back, haunted by the horrors they'd witnessed. X-49 had a way of stripping a man bare, revealing the darkness lurking within. The scars that crisscrossed my face were a map of my failures. A hacking cough seized me, doubling me over. I spat into the sink, a thick glob of phlegm marring the porcelain. They said it was the dust, the fine particles that wormed their way into your lungs and slowly eroded your insides. But I knew better. It was the creeping dread that poisoned your soul. I straightened, wiping my mouth with the back of my hand. Another day in paradise, I thought bitterly. I donned my worn overalls, the coarse fabric a second skin. The tools in my belt clinked a metallic chorus as I strapped them on, the familiar weight a small comfort in this place. The door hissed open, a gust of stale air momentarily dispelling the silence. I stepped out into the corridor, my footsteps the only sound in the hallway. The walls, adorned with peeling paint and cryptic graffiti, seemed to close in on me. I could feel the weight of 1,000 eyes, the ghosts of miners who'd met their end in this forsaken place. I headed towards the mess hall, my stomach a hollow pit of anticipation. The promise of lukewarm gruel and synthetic coffee was enough to propel me forward. The mess hall was a symphony of clangs and clatter as the early risers gathered for their sustenance. I joined the queue, nodding a curt greeting to a grizzled veteran whose face was lined with 1,000 marks of hardship. "Another day, another credit," he mumbled. I forced a smile. "Just another spin on this forsaken rock." The veteran chuckled, a dry, hollow sound. "Keep your head down, kid. And your eyes on the prize." What prize? A slow death in the belly of this asteroid? The prospect of a meager pension earned at the cost of my sanity? I took my tray, the meager portions a mockery of a meal. I found a solitary corner, away from the prying eyes and idle chatter. The gruel was tasteless, the coffee a bitter sludge. But it was fuel, and fuel was all that mattered in this wasteland. As I ate, my gaze drifted towards the viewport, a small window into the vast expanse of space. The asteroid field stretched out before me, a chaotic dance of rocks and ice. The sight was both mesmerizing and terrifying. My spine tingled, a premonition of impending doom. I finished my meal, the unease settling like a lead weight in my stomach. I knew, deep down, that something was amiss on X-49. Something dark and sinister lurked beneath the surface, waiting to be unearthed. The clang of the mess hall door announced my exit. The corridor was still deserted, the low hum of the ventilation system the only sign of life. I made my way to the lift, the metal cage rattling as it descended into the depths of the mine. The descent was slow, with every creak and groan of the machinery highlighting the precariousness of our existence. I emerged into the belly of the beast, the cavernous expanse of the mine illuminated by harsh fluorescent lights. The air was thick with the smell of sulfur and damp earth. I joined my fellow miners. We were a motley crew, a band of misfits united by a shared dream of escaping this rock. The foreman, a burly man with a voice like gravel, barked out orders. We dispersed, each man to his designated task. I shouldered my pickaxe, its weight a familiar burden. I found my spot, a small alcove in the rock face, and set to work. The rhythmic clang of metal against stone was a hypnotic mantra, a way to drown out the doubts that plagued me. I chipped away at the rock, each strike a small victory against the unforgiving environment. A shadow fell over me, interrupting my thoughts. I looked up to see the foreman looming over me, his face a mask of disapproval. "You're slacking, boy," he growled, his breath hot against my face. "Pick up the pace or you'll be spending the rest of your shift in the brig." I gritted my teeth, the anger rising within me. But I knew better than to challenge him. I redoubled my efforts. The pickaxe bit into the rock with renewed vigor, each strike fueled by resentment and frustration. The hours dragged on, each one a battle against exhaustion. The rock face seemed to mock me, its unyielding surface highlighting the futility of our endeavors. My muscles ached. My lungs burned, but I pushed on, driven by the primal need to survive. A shout from across the cavern broke the monotony. I turned to see a group of miners huddled around a newly exposed section of rock. A murmur of excitement rippled through the crowd. I joined them, my curiosity piqued. The miners parted, revealing a strange sight. Embedded in the rock face was a smooth, metallic object, its surface gleaming in the harsh light. The foreman pushed his way through the crowd, his eyes widening at the sight. He reached out, his rough hand tracing the contours of the object. A hush fell over the miners as they watched, their breaths held in anticipation. The foreman turned to us, his face alight with awe and greed. "This is it, boys," he proclaimed, his voice ringing with triumph. "This is our ticket out of this hellhole. This is the find of a lifetime." A cheer erupted from the miners, their faces transformed by hope. The foreman's excitement was contagious, spreading through the crew like wildfire. Men who had moments ago been weary and disheartened were now invigorated, their eyes gleaming with avarice. The mysterious object was carefully extracted from the rock face, revealing its full form. It was a smooth, ovoid structure, approximately the size of a man's torso. Its surface shone with an ever-changing array of colors, dazzling with every beam of light. "Get this back to the base," the foreman ordered, his voice laced with a newfound authority. "We'll have the scientists analyze it, figure out what we're dealing with." A team of miners was quickly assembled, their task to transport the object to the surface. They hoisted it onto a stretcher, their movements cautious and deliberate. I watched as they disappeared into the darkness, the object's otherworldly glow fading into the distance. The rest of us returned to our labors, but the atmosphere had shifted. The discovery had injected a renewed sense of purpose into the crew. Even the most cynical among us couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. Perhaps this was the turning point, the moment that would change our fortunes. I continued to chip away at the rock face, but my thoughts were elsewhere. The mysterious object haunted me, its alien beauty both alluring and unsettling. What secrets did it hold? What dangers did it pose? The shift dragged on, the minutes feeling like hours. Finally, the foreman signaled the end of our labors. We trudged back to the lift, our bodies aching. As we ascended to the surface, I couldn't help but steal a glance at the object now secured in a containment unit in the lift's cargo hold. It seemed to quiver with an inner energy, a silent promise of untold wonders or unimaginable horrors. Upon reaching the surface, the object was immediately transported to the research lab, a facility buried deep within the base. A team of scientists, led by a wizened old man named Dr. Brenner, had been summoned to examine it. I watched from a distance as they swarmed around the containment unit, their faces a mixture of fascination and apprehension. Dr. Brenner emerged from the lab a few hours later, his usually stoic expression replaced by a look of bewilderment. He called a meeting of the senior staff. including the foreman and a few other high-ranking officials. I managed to eavesdrop on their conversation. "It's not a mineral," Dr. Brenner announced, his voice hushed. "It's organic." A collective gasp filled the room. Organic? On a barren asteroid? It was impossible. "What does that mean?" the foreman asked, his brow furrowed. "It means," Dr. Brenner continued, "that it's alive." The room fell silent. I could feel the tension, the unspoken fear that gripped the men. What had we unearthed? What horrors awaited us? The meeting adjourned, the men dispersing in a state of shock and confusion. I retreated to my quarters, my mind reeling. The discovery of the organic object had shattered our understanding of this place. Sleep didn't come easy that night. I tossed and turned, the image of the organic object seared into my mind. The rhythmic hum of the ventilation system did little to soothe my troubled thoughts. The next morning, you could feel the tension in the base. The miners moved about their tasks with a nervous energy, their usual banter replaced by hushed whispers and furtive glances. The object had become the sole topic of conversation, a source of both fascination and dread. As I made my way to the mess hall, I overheard a group of miners discussing the latest rumors. "They say it's some kind of egg," one whispered, his eyes wide with alarm. "An egg, here, on a lifeless rock?" another scoffed. "That's what they're saying," the first insisted. "And it's not just any egg. They say it's filled with some kind of creature." A creature? What kind of creature could survive in the harsh environment of X-49? And what would happen if it hatched? The mess hall was abuzz with similar conversations, the air thick with speculation and fear. I took my tray and found a secluded corner, my appetite diminished by the unsettling rumors. The usually mundane act of eating now felt like a countdown, each bite bringing us closer to an unknown fate. The day's shift was a chaotic dance of apprehension and anticipation. The miners worked with a feverish intensity, their picks and drills biting into the rock with a vengeance. We all knew that our time was running out, that whatever lay inside that egg was about to change our lives forever. As the end of the shift neared, an alarm blared through the mine, its shrill wail cutting through the din of machinery. A sense of panic swept through the crew as we scrambled to evacuate. I followed the throng of miners towards the lift. The lift was packed, smelling of sweat and fear. The descent was agonizingly slow, each creak and groan of the machinery amplifying the tension. As we neared the surface, a voice crackled over the intercom, its tone grave and urgent. "Attention all personnel, this is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Secure all exits and prepare for lockdown. I repeat, prepare for lockdown." The announcement sent a wave of terror through the lift. Lockdown? What had happened? What were we facing? The lift doors opened, revealing a scene of chaos. Armed guards patrolled the corridors, their faces determined. The miners were herded into a secure area, their movements monitored by watchful eyes. The foreman addressed the crowd, his voice booming through the loudspeaker. "There's been a breach in the lab," he announced. "The creature has escaped." A collective gasp rose from the miners, their faces pale with terror. The creature, it was real. "Remain calm," the foreman continued, his voice strained. "The security team is handling the situation. We'll get through this." But his words offered little comfort. The reality of the situation was sinking in. We were trapped in this outpost with an unknown creature, its intentions and capabilities shrouded in mystery. The egg had hatched, and our nightmare had just begun. The lockdown announcement continued to loop over the intercom. Suddenly the lights dimmed and died, plunging us into darkness. A chorus of startled cries filled the air as the miners stumbled and groped blindly. I felt a surge of adrenaline, my senses heightened. The darkness was absolute, the silence deafening. A low snarl sent a fresh wave of panic through the crowd. It was a primal sound, animalistic and menacing. The miners huddled together, their fear overwhelming. The growl was followed by a series of shuffling sounds, growing closer with each passing second. A cold sweat broke out on my skin, my heart pounding in my ears. I fumbled for my pickaxe. the familiar weight of the tool offering a modicum of comfort. A figure emerged from the darkness, its silhouette barely visible in the faint light filtering through the vents. It was tall and lanky, its limbs distorted. Its head was a misshapen mass, its features obscured by shadow. A scream pierced the air as one of the miners jumped at the creature, his pickaxe raised high. The figure moved with astonishing speed. Its arm flashed as it swatted the miner aside like a fly. The man crumpled to the ground, his body limp and lifeless. Panic erupted among the miners, their cries filling the chamber. Some fled in terror, their footsteps pounding against the metal floor. Others charged at the creature, their weapons raised in defiance. I watched in horror as the creature dispatched its attackers with ease, its movements fluid and predatory. It was like a nightmare come to life, a monstrosity from the depths of our darkest fears. I knew I couldn't stay here, couldn't risk being cornered like the others. I slipped away from the melee, seeking refuge in the labyrinthine tunnels that crisscrossed the mine. The darkness was my ally now, concealing my movements as I navigated the maze of tunnels. The sounds of the battle faded behind me, replaced by the drip of water and the sound of my breathing. I stumbled upon a storage room, its door ajar. I slipped inside, closing the door behind me and barricading it with a heavy crate. The room was cramped and dusty, filled with discarded equipment and supplies. I huddled in a corner, my pickaxe clutched tightly in my hand. I could hear the creature moving through the tunnels, its growls and hisses sending shivers down my spine. I knew it was only a matter of time before it found me. The minutes ticked by, each one agonizingly slow. I strained my ears, listening for any sign of the creature's approach. The silence was deafening. A sudden scraping sound from outside the door sent a jolt of fear through me. The sound grew louder, closer. The door creaked open, revealing a sliver of light. I raised my pickaxe, ready to strike, but the figure that emerged was not the creature I feared. It was a young miner, his face pale and streaked with sweat. "Thank God!" he gasped, his voice trembling. "I thought I was the only one left!" I lowered my weapon, a wave of relief flooding over me. I wasn't alone. We were in this together. "We need to get out of here," the young miner whispered, his voice barely audible. "That thing. It's not human." "Do you know a way out?" I asked. He hesitated, his eyes darting around the room. "There's a maintenance tunnel that leads to a secondary exit." I stood up, my pickaxe still clutched in my hand. "Lead the way." We crept out of the storage room, the darkness a shroud around us. The creature's rampage was audible throughout the tunnels, signaling the danger lurking around every corner. The young miner led me through a maze of twisting corridors, his footsteps light and quick. We passed abandoned equipment and scattered debris, evidence of the chaos that had engulfed the mine. We reached a hatch set into the wall, its rusted hinges creaking as we pried it open. The miner squeezed through first, then beckoned me to follow. I crawled into the narrow tunnel, the darkness pressing in on all sides. The tunnel was cramped and claustrophobic, the air stale and musty. We moved slowly, our progress hampered by the debris that littered the floor. The sounds of the creature's rampage grew fainter as we moved deeper into the bowels of the mine. After a while, we reached a dead end. The miner cursed under his breath, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "This is it," he muttered. "We're trapped." I ran my hand along the rough rock wall, searching for a way out. My fingers brushed against a loose stone, its edges crumbling under my touch. I pulled, and the stone came free, revealing a small opening in the wall. "Help me with this," I said, my voice tight with urgency. Together we pried the opening wider, revealing a narrow passageway. We squeezed through the passage, emerging into a cavern illuminated by a shaft of sunlight filtering through a crack in the ceiling. A ladder led up to the surface, its rungs rusted and precarious. "We made it," the miner said, his face alight with relief. We climbed the ladder, our hearts pounding with anticipation. As we emerged into the bright sunlight, a wave of disorientation swept over me. I blinked, my eyes adjusting to the sudden brightness. The landscape was barren, a stark contrast to the subterranean world we had just escaped. The mining base stood in the distance, its lights extinguished, its silence ominous. "What now?" the miner asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. I scanned the horizon. "We need to find help," I said. Nausea overwhelmed me as we staggered away from the mine entrance. The sun beat down on our backs, its heat a stark contrast to the chill of the tunnels. We were exposed, vulnerable, two specks against the vast canvas of the asteroid field. "We need to find shelter," I rasped, my throat parched. The young miner's eyes scanned the horizon. "There's a supply depot a few clicks east. We might find something there." We set off, our boots crunching on the rocky terrain. The supply depot was a cluster of prefabricated structures, their metal surfaces baked by the sun. We approached cautiously, our senses on high alert. The silence was haunting, emphasizing the complete absence of life due to the creature's havoc. The depot's doors were locked, but the young miner, whose name I learned was Ethan, was resourceful. He found a crowbar wedged under a pile of crates and used it to pry open a side entrance. The interior was dim and dusty, the air stale and stagnant. Rows of shelves lined the walls, their contents a jumble of tools, supplies, and ration packs. We gathered what we could carry, our backpacks bulging with essentials. As we rummaged through the supplies, Ethan let out a cry of triumph. "Look at this!" he exclaimed, holding up a handheld radio. "It's still working!" I snatched the radio from him, my heart leaping with hope. "This could be our salvation," I said, my voice trembling. I turned the dial, scanning the frequencies for any sign of life. Static hissed through the speaker, punctuated by bursts of unintelligible chatter. I adjusted the dial, my fingers trembling with anticipation. Finally, a voice broke through the static, clear and distinct. "This is Base Command. Is anyone out there? Please respond." I pressed the transmit button, my voice hoarse with emotion. "This is Zane. We're alive. We escaped the mine." There was a pause, then a burst of static, followed by a different voice, this one filled with relief and urgency. "Zane, this is Commander Flynn. What's your situation? Are there other survivors?" I quickly relayed the events of the past few hours, the escape from the mine, the creature's rampage, the lockdown. "We're at the supply depot east of the base," I finished. "We need extraction. We need help." There was another pause, then Commander Flynn's voice returned, grave and resolute. "We're sending a team to your location. Stay put and stay safe. Help is on the way." I lowered the radio, feeling a wave of exhaustion overtake me. We had made contact, alerted the outside world to the horrors that had unfolded on X-49. But the relief was short-lived. We were still trapped on this rock, at the mercy of an unknown predator. We barricaded the depot's doors, using whatever we could find to fortify our position. We rationed our supplies, knowing that help was still hours away. As we waited, the silence was broken only by the howl of the wind and the occasional creak of the metal structure. The sun began its descent, casting shadows that danced and twisted across the barren landscape. We huddled together, our fear and uncertainty a shared burden. We were two survivors, clinging to hope in the face of overwhelming odds. We had witnessed the horrors of X-49, the dark secrets that lurked beneath its surface. But we were determined to survive, to escape this rock and tell our tale. We took turns keeping watch, our eyes straining to pierce the encroaching darkness. Hours passed in tense silence, broken only by the crackle of the radio as Commander Flynn updated us on the rescue operation. We were sitting ducks, easy prey for the creature that roamed the darkness. As the night grew deeper, a low rumble rolled across the plains. The ground beneath us trembled, sending a shiver down my spine. We exchanged a worried glance, our minds racing with possibilities. "What was that?" Ethan whispered. I shook my head, my grip tightening on my pickaxe. I don't know, but it can't be good. The rumble intensified, followed by a deafening roar that shattered the silence. A tremor ripped through the depot, sending shelves crashing to the floor. We ducked for cover, our ears ringing from the deafening sound. When the shaking subsided, we cautiously emerged from our hiding place. The air was filled with dust, the floor littered with debris. The depot's structural integrity had been compromised, its metal frame twisted and warped. A shadow moved outside the window, its form barely visible in the moonlight. It was the creature. "We have to move," I hissed, grabbing Ethan by the arm. "Now." We bolted out of the back entrance, our backpacks banging against our backs. The creature's roar filled the air once again, this time closer, more menacing. We ran blindly, our lungs burning, our legs pumping. The ground gave way beneath us and we tumbled down a steep incline, our bodies bouncing and rolling over the rough terrain. We came to rest at the bottom, bruised and battered but alive. We scrambled to our feet. The creature's cry filled the darkness, its proximity chilling us to the bone. "This way!" Ethan shouted, pointing towards a cluster of boulders. We ran towards the rocks, their jagged forms offering a modicum of cover. We squeezed into a narrow crevice, our bodies pressed tightly together. The creature's footsteps pounded towards us, its heavy steps audible in the stillness of the night. We held our breath, our eyes wide with terror. The creature paused at the mouth of the crevice, its shadow looming over us. I could feel its hot breath on my face, smell the stench of decay emanating from its body. I raised my pickaxe, prepared to fight for our lives, but then the creature turned and lumbered away, its interest seemingly lost. We remained frozen in place, our bodies trembling with adrenaline. We had narrowly escaped death, but the danger was far from over. The creature was still out there, a predator stalking its prey. We strained our ears, listening for the telltale sounds of the creature's approach. The silence offered relief from immediate danger, but constantly highlighted our vulnerability. As the night wore on, exhaustion began to take its toll. Ethan's breathing slowed, his head lolling against my shoulder. I fought the urge to succumb to sleep, knowing that it could be our undoing. I nudged him awake, my voice a harsh whisper. "Stay with me, Ethan, we can't let our guard down." He blinked sleepily, his eyes bleary. "How much longer?" he mumbled. "I don't know," I admitted, "but we have to stay alert." We continued our vigil, our senses heightened, our nerves frayed. The hours crawled by, each one a test of our endurance. Our only connection to the outside world, the radio, was silent, emphasizing our seclusion. The first rays of dawn finally broke through the darkness, casting a pale light on the landscape. We emerged from our hiding place, our bodies stiff and sore. "We need a plan," I said. "We can't just sit here and wait to be rescued." Ethan agreed, his face grim. "We need to find a way to defend ourselves. If that thing comes back, we need to be ready for it." We scavenged through the remains of the supply depot, searching for anything that could be used as a weapon. We found a few lengths of pipe, a rusty axe, and a handful of flares. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. We fortified our position as best we could, piling up rocks to create a barricade. We set up a watch schedule, taking turns monitoring the horizon for any sign of the creature. The day passed slowly, the sun beating down mercilessly on our backs. We rationed our water and food, knowing that our supplies were dwindling. The radio remained silent, our hopes of rescue fading with each passing hour. As darkness fell, we retreated to our shelter, our bodies aching, our spirits flagging. The distant howl of the beast chilled us, emphasizing the threats lurking around. We huddled together, our fear and uncertainty a shared burden. We were two castaways adrift in a sea of darkness, our fate uncertain. But we clung to the hope that somehow, some way, we would survive this ordeal. We knew that we couldn't stay here, couldn't wait passively for our doom. We had to take action, to fight for our survival. But the question remained, how could we defeat a creature that seemed unstoppable? We were just two miners, armed with nothing but scraps and desperation. The sun climbed higher in the sky, baking the barren landscape with its unforgiving rays. Our barricade offered little respite from the heat, and our meager water supply was rapidly dwindling. Just when it seemed like hope was a distant memory, a speck appeared on the horizon. It grew larger with each passing moment, resolving into a dropship, its engines thundering as it descended towards our location. We had been found. The dropship landed with a thud, kicking up a cloud of dust. A squad of heavily armed soldiers emerged, their weapons at the ready. Their leader, a grizzled veteran with a no-nonsense demeanor, approached us. "Zane!" he barked, his eyes scanning us from head to toe. "That's us," I replied, my voice raspy from thirst. "We're here to extract you," he said. "Grab your gear, we're getting out of here." We scrambled aboard the dropship. As we lifted off, I risked a glance back at the landscape, a wave of nausea rising in my throat. X-49 had been a nightmare, a place of unspeakable horrors. Back at the company's headquarters, we were debriefed by a panel of stern-faced executives. They listened intently as we recounted our ordeal. "So, you're saying that the creature is still loose on the asteroid?" one of the executives asked, his voice laced with concern. "It's out there hunting," I confirmed grimly. "It's only a matter of time before it finds more victims." The executives exchanged uneasy glances. The implications of our story were clear. The creature posed a significant threat, not only to the remaining miners on X-49, but also to the company's interests. "We need to contain this situation," another executive declared. "We can't let this get out of hand." A plan was quickly hatched. A heavily armed security team would be dispatched to X-49 to neutralize the creature. They would be accompanied by a team of scientists, tasked with studying the organism and determining its origins. I was asked to join the mission, my knowledge of the mine's layout deemed invaluable. Ethan, despite his injuries, insisted on coming along. We were driven by a sense of duty, a need to see this through to the end. The dropship descended through the thick atmosphere of X-49, its engines thrumming a steady rhythm against the hull. As I looked through the viewport, the familiar scenery brought back memories of the horrors we had survived. The scarred terrain, the abandoned machinery, the eerie silence. It all spoke of the devastation wrought by the creature. Beside me, Ethan fidgeted nervously, his fingers drumming against his thigh. He had barely spoken since our rescue, his eyes haunted by the memories of our ordeal. I placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, a silent gesture of camaraderie. The dropship touched down on the landing pad with a jolt. The doors hissed open, revealing a scene of controlled chaos. Soldiers in full combat gear swarmed the area, their weapons at the ready. A team of scientists, clad in protective suits, huddled together. We disembarked, the weight of our experience heavy upon us. The commander of the security detail, a battle-hardened veteran named Sergeant Harper, approached us. "You two are the miners who escaped?" he asked, his voice gruff but not unkind. I confirmed. "That's right, Sergeant." "We've been briefed on your situation," he said. "You'll be accompanying us back into the mine. Your knowledge of the layout will be invaluable." I glanced at Ethan, who nodded silently. We knew the risks, but we also knew that we couldn't abandon the others to their fate. We were the only ones who could guide the soldiers through the labyrinthine tunnels, the only ones who could help them track down the creature. We donned protective suits and were issued standard-issue rifles. The weapons felt unfamiliar in our hands, a stark contrast to the pickaxes and drills we were accustomed to. But the weight of the rifle was reassuring. Sergeant Harper led us towards the mine entrance, his squad following close behind. The airlock hissed open, revealing the familiar darkness that lay within. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the horrors that awaited us. We descended into the mine, our flashlights cutting through the gloom. We moved cautiously, our senses on high alert. We were venturing into the belly of the beast, the lair of an unknown predator. We followed the familiar route, guided by my memory of the mine's layout. We passed the abandoned equipment, the bloodstains that marked the creature's path. We reached the central chamber, the site of the initial attack. The air was thick with the stench of death, the floor littered with the remains of the miners who had fallen victim to the creature. Sergeant Harper surveyed the scene, his face grim. "This thing is a monster," he muttered. "We need to find it and put it down." We continued our search, our flashlights probing the darkness. We knew that the creature was out there, somewhere in the tunnels, waiting for us. Suddenly, a bellow shattered the silence, reverberating through the tunnels. We froze, our bodies tensing. The creature was close, very close. Sergeant Harper raised a clenched fist, signaling for us to halt. The soldiers fanned out, their rifles trained on the darkness ahead. The roar erupted again, closer this time, a challenge that reverberated through the tunnels. Then it emerged from the gloom, a hulking silhouette against the backdrop of lights. It was larger than I remembered, its form shifting and distorting as it moved. "Open fire!" Harper's command shattered the silence. A volley of shots erupted, their deafening reports filling the mine. The creature's shriek made me shudder involuntarily. It lunged forward, its movement surprisingly agile for its size. I squeezed the trigger of my rifle, the recoil jolting my shoulder. A spray of bullets found their mark, but the creature seemed unfazed. It swatted aside a soldier with a flick of its arm, sending him sprawling to the ground. The battle descended into chaos, a maelstrom of gunfire, screams, and the sickening thud of flesh against metal. The creature was a force of destruction, its strength and speed overwhelming our defenses. Ethan and I fought back to back, our rifles spitting fire. The heat of the battle was intoxicating, a surge of adrenaline that masked the fear. We were outmatched, outgunned, but we refused to yield. The creature closed in on us, its distorted face a mask of rage. It charged, its arms outstretched in the dim light. I rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding its grasp. Ethan fired a burst from his rifle, the bullets impacting the creature's hide with a dull thud. It let out a painful cry, its attention momentarily diverted. I seized the opportunity, scrambling to my feet and circling behind the beast. I raised my rifle and fired a shot into its back, aiming for the vulnerable spot I had observed during our first encounter. The creature convulsed, its movements slowing. It turned to face me, its eyes burning with hatred. I fired another shot, this time striking its head. The creature staggered, its legs buckling beneath it. With a final agonizing roar, it collapsed to the ground, its body twitching and spasming. The battle was over, but the victory was bittersweet. We had lost good men, their lives sacrificed to the darkness of X-49. The medbay hummed with the harmonious sound of life support systems. I lay on a cot, the rhythmic beeping a stark contrast to the chaos that had consumed X-49. My body ached, a patchwork of bruises and lacerations, but my spirit was strangely calm. We had survived, against all odds. Ethan sat beside me, his face reflecting the trauma of our ordeal. He had been discharged earlier, his injuries less severe than mine, but the wounds that ran deepest were not physical. We were both haunted by the horrors we had witnessed, the lives that had been lost. "They're calling it a quarantine," he said. "They've sealed off the asteroid, declared it a hazard zone." I nodded, not surprised. The company had a reputation for prioritizing profit over people. They would do whatever it took to contain the incident, to prevent the truth from leaking out. "What about the others?" I asked, my voice thick with emotion. "The ones who didn't make it out." Ethan looked away, his jaw clenching. "They're gone," he said, his voice barely audible. "But they won't be forgotten." We sat in silence, the weight of our shared grief heavy in the air. We had been through hell together, forged in the crucible of shared trauma. We were brothers now, bound by a bond that could never be broken. The door to the medbay slid open, revealing a figure in a crisp white coat. It was Dr. Brenner, the lead scientist who had accompanied us on the mission. His face was pale, his eyes shadowed with fatigue. "How are you feeling, gentlemen?" he inquired, his voice gentle. "Alive," I replied, managing a wry smile. He nodded. "You both showed remarkable resilience. You're lucky to be alive." "Luck had nothing to do with it," Ethan interjected. "We fought for our lives." Dr. Brenner's eyes lingered on Ethan for a moment, admiration in their depths. "Indeed you did," he said. Your actions were commendable. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I've been authorized to offer you a generous compensation package, he continued. In exchange for your silence, of course. I met his gaze, my eyes narrowing. Silence? You think we can forget what we saw? What we experienced? I understand your anger, Dr. Brenner said, his voice placating. But this is a sensitive matter. The company's reputation is at stake. I scoffed. Reputation? You're worried about your reputation. What about the lives that were lost? The miners who were slaughtered like animals? Dr. Brenner sighed, his shoulders slumping. I know, he said. Believe me, I know. But there's nothing we can do for them now. All we can do is try to prevent this from happening again. He paused, his gaze returning to mine. The compensation package is substantial, he said. It could change your lives. I looked at Ethan, who shrugged. We both knew that we had no choice. We were at their mercy, pawns in a corporate game. We'll take it, I said, my voice flat. Dr. Brenner nodded, a relieved smile spreading across his face. Excellent, he said. I'll have the paperwork drawn up immediately. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. One more thing, he said. Forget about X-49. It never existed. The door slid shut behind him, leaving us alone with our thoughts. We had traded our silence for a comfortable life, a life built on lies and deceit. X-49's terrors permanently scarred us, our souls bearing the marks of the hidden darkness. We would move on, scarred but not broken, forever bound by the shared experience of surviving the nightmare.